Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, where two busy dads get games to the table by any means necessary. Check us out, along with other great podcasts, at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 79. Apps of early 2018 and the psychology of lists. Hey everybody, welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. This is Anthony, once again with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
All right, guys, it is that time of year again. Every 4 to 6 months, we have to look at all the mini apps coming out, and so we figured now is a good time to stop and do it because there are a lot of really big ones coming very soon that we're going to want to talk about over the summer, probably.
We just got a notification for Terraforming Mars app coming very, very soon. Scythe is entering beta. Oh, no.
Yeah, and there's other stuff that I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about yet. So there are things, guys. There are many, many things. And these are the ones that have already come out this year. So let's get them out of the way.
So let's run through them. There's some good ones, some not so good ones. We'll run through them real fast. And then after that, so people know that I'm a psychotherapist in my real life. Way back, I think it was like episode 13 or so, I did kind of a psychology deep dive on a subject relevant to gaming. I miss doing that. I'm going to do that again, this time with respect to like top 10 lists and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be me dorking out on my psychology stuff. But first, we are going to give you gaming content, which is what we're all about here. So I'm going to run through in rapid review fashion 4 apps that have come out, and then Anthony is going to talk a little bit about another app, not directly related to board games, but come on, Civ 6 is a board game, right?
Yeah.
It's a board game.
It's exactly what we want out of a board game. It's why we compare all of our Civilization games to it. So
we'll get to that in a second, but let me go through a couple of apps that are shorter, and I'll tell you what I think. First up is Smash Up. Smash Up came out later last year. It is a pretty faithful adaptation, pretty straightforward adaptation of the card game of the same name. You're if you don't know the game, you're taking two factions, like two silly factions, like, ninjas and, wizards and tricksters and leprechauns or whatever. Each faction has a 20 card deck. You're shuffling them together and you're playing this kind of take that game where, you play a card or play a couple of cards on these bases and you're trying to claim the base. And you can really screw with each other. So like you're here because, you can, someone's winning and then you play a card and they're not winning anymore. Or they thought they were going to take this base. Oh, they're not going to take that base anymore. So cool game. I enjoy the real physical game. You're not hearing about this game as an app. You are not hearing about it. It didn't come up with any of the year-end lists. It didn't come with our list. Didn't come with nominated for Golden Geek. Because it's Asmodee Digital. What are you doing? This is not a good implementation of this app. For like a couple of things are wrong with it, but the main one is for me, like every single card game app has like a swipe function. Like all you have to do is like kind of put your finger on the card and like kind of move it around the screen. This one doesn't have that. You have to when you press the card, it blows up, so you actually can read it, but you can't move it. And that seems like such a silly thing, but when every other game does a thing one way, you decide to go another way, and that's all it is, it's a card game, come on. I don't know if you encountered that problem.
Yeah, I just found it clunky and uncomfortable to play. For such a short, easy game, moving around and being able to see all the different locations and actually being able to evaluate what your levels are there and the UI of it just wasn't particularly pleasant.
Yeah, and so you have to read every card. It's not obvious what the card does just by looking at it. You have to blow it up, and I can't remember what all the cards do. So you're always blowing up cards. You're always reading, and you're clicking. Nope, pass. That's Smash Up. This is supposed to be rapid, so that's my judgment. Ultimately, pass. Anthony, you agree with me?
Yeah, I passed this one.
Hard pass. Next up, Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is the vaporware, or we thought it was going to be vaporware. This was in development basically since the release of the base game in 2010. Finally, we got it at the end of 2017, and it is there.
It's a decent app.
It's a smooth app. It replicates the game pretty well. But for I guess because of the expectations and because of the quite frankly the standard that a lot of these other apps have established. Like, you look at some of the bigger apps, they do a lot more. Like, they could have done a ton. Like, they could have had, like, talking statue of Zeus and, all sorts of, like pop-ups with animations and everything. If you build a wonder, like if, building a wonder is supposed to be this amazing thing. And in the app, you can actually like, well, I have a wonder. It does none of that. It is just the game. It's works smooth. The multiplayer works smooth and the pass and play and everything. They just added Leaders expansion, which why didn't you release with a couple of expansions at the beginning? This is not a huge complicated deal, but there's really, I just don't think that there's anything to see here.
I agree. Yeah, my biggest complaint when it came out was this needs at least one expansion because the base game, And the other thing I found too is I did get into it for a little bit, but it has that thing where some apps do have, like Race for the Galaxy, where you can finish a game in like 4 minutes. You can just bam, 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 bam if you're playing against the AI. And if you do that too much, you don't want to play the game as much because you kind of just burn out on it. It's not, you want more of a production. You want it to be more happening, kind of a, like you said, like where's the gravitas that this game deserved, especially after like 3 years in development. It's just the game, and it makes you wonder what took so long,
Yeah, like at least give me like a sound effect when you build a wonder. Can I get like a little firework or the ancient equivalent thereof? It's just an app. If you like Seven Wonders, obviously it's Seven Wonders on the go. I played it a fair amount when I first got it, but it's just I deleted it off my phone. I think I'm done with Seven Wonders until until Babel. I hear about Babel coming out, which it doesn't have a room for Babel right now on the current UI screen, so I'm not gonna hold my breath. Next up, we're actually kind of ascending in quality. Next up is a Dresden Files cooperative card game. So this game we reviewed a couple of episodes ago when we did our kind of geek pop culture episode, so I won't go over the whole gameplay. It's kind of a puzzly card game, if I can kind of, encapsulate it as quickly as I can. You're playing characters from the novels, from the Dresden Files novels, so you're getting Karen Murphy and Susan Rodriguez and all these other characters. They each have a deck of cards, and you have to kind of work through a tableau of cards, which represents obstacles, enemies, cases to solve, and you're matching numbers and you're manipulating the order of the cards. But it's a very, very puzzly experience. This game, the app, I think really does a good job faithfully representing the card game in a much kind of, I think it works better than the other games. Maybe it's because the game itself, like the base game, is simpler, so it's easier to kind of represent on the screen. But they reproduced a lot of the original art for the game. The gameplay is really smooth. My one thing about it, though, when you're playing solo, you're playing 3 characters, and you have all 3 of their hands, so like a hand of 6 cards. So you have 18 cards laid out in front of you that you have to kind of use in order. The app does not lay all those cards out at once. You're constantly kind of having to tab over to see what the other person has. So the whole point of the game is to interact. This guy does this girl does this person discards that, this person does this. When you're tabbing, I just didn't, like, I can't play as well.
You're just playing on the phone?
Yeah, I'm playing on the phone.
Yeah, on the iPad, they lay them all out in one chunk beneath the play space.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's I have not played on the phone, but that would be very annoying. You do have to zoom in sometimes. Annoying. Like you can't always, like if you don't remember what a card does, like if it has text on it, most of them don't. But if it does have text on it, like this happens when you do this, then you'd have to zoom in sometimes. But yeah, they managed to get everything on the one screen, which is nice.
Yeah, so on the iPad, so I just gave my iPhone review unwittingly. Is the iPad? Were you happy with the game?
Yeah, I did. Actually, was quite happy with the game. It's like the opposite problem as Seven Wonders, where if Seven Wonders, you're like, I don't really want to play the game as much anymore because I just played 19 games of this in 45 minutes. This one is already kind of a short game on the table, and you lose a fair amount until you solve the puzzle. On the iPad, it takes the same amount of time because it's still just that puzzle. But when you lose, you can reset real fast and try again. So I do find myself going through and retrying over and over again on some of the ones I've had trouble with. Whereas the actual card game, you play it 2 or 3 times, you get it off the table, you put it away. So I like that quite a bit. And it comes with a fair amount of content when you buy it. So it's not just the very bare bones, basic starter stuff. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, we both give thumbs up to Dresden Files cooperative card game. And the last one, this actually released this year, a very, very short time ago. This is Hostage Negotiator, which is one of those apps where it's like, we should have had this the whole time.
Yeah, from day one.
It should have released as an app and then came out as a card game after. So it is Hostage Negotiator. They did kind of very little to change it up. But just the way Hostage Negotiator plays out, the 6 cards, it isn't a problem that the cards aren't that readable. You have to zoom in because they're static. You just get to know what the cards do after a while. It's not like Smash Up where there's like a billion of them, or Dresden Files, which there's not that many of them, but they're still kind of new. They can float in there. You have to zoom in. This one, you get to know the cards really, really well, really fast, which makes a huge difference. And the dice rolling, the dice rolls, they seem a little bit more friendly here. Maybe it's just my perception as opposed to like the physical game. Or what you said before, like you can play like a billion games. So like losses don't sting as much. So like when you lose in the physical game, you have to set it all up. You have to do whatever. This game, you lose. And it's like, all right, I'll just fire it up and spend another 4 minutes playing. Has a great tutorial. I think the tutorial is really well done. Has a good achievement system, which I think Dresden Files has an achievement system. Seven Wonders does not. What? No achievement system?
It's an app, you guys.
Come on!
Yeah, I think that's a great point, though. I think any solo game that you're going to lose 80% of the time should be an app, because those are the ones like Onirim or the game where you're just like reset, try again, reset, try again, reset, try again. The games where you're just playing through against the AI or something, you're probably not going to do that as much because, yeah, it does kind of water down the experience.
Mm-hmm. So I've been playing Hostage Negotiator. I have completed all the achievements. I just need the number of wins achievements, which that'll take me a while. I might just hit it though because I really dig it. It's my favorite of these 4. I can't say enough good things about Hostage Negotiator. Should have been an app the whole time.
Man, you've come a long way since we started this show.
That's true. Oh my god.
We had a conversation on like episode 3 where you're like, Hostage Negotiator.
I learned how to play. And that was it. I learned how to play. I was playing wrong. Like really. I was just rolling. And I was like, I got a card and I rolled it. And as soon as I figured out how to manage the whole playing cards face down for conversation points and when to do that, when not to do that. Oh,
yeah.
I could admit that I was failing, that it was me, that it wasn't you, it was me. And now I'm totally 180 turned around. They are going to release the abductor packs up to Crime Wave. They're not going to release Crime Wave in the app, but everything Abductor 4 they're going to release in the app. Can't wait for it. It's a day one purchase. Love it.
All right, cool. I have not had a chance to play that one very much, so I can't say one way or the other, but I like the game anyways. Never had a problem with it, so I'm sure I like it just fine.
All right, and you have been busying yourself with Civ 6. Oh my goodness, what is this doing on a mobile device?
Yeah, that's the big question. This was a huge surprise when it got released, and so the game originally came out in October 2016, so it's not that old of a game, and it's a big, meaty PC game. If you haven't played it, Civilization, the basic idea is you build a civilization, you achieve victory either through military, technology, diplomacy, or culture. You explore things, you build some troops, you build the wonders, you build up your agriculture around your cities, you try out new governments, all sorts of stuff. The big difference between 6 from 5 is that there's some different paths now. The technology's opened up a little bit, so you're not just following a set tree, it's kind of wide open. And there's updated government civic structure, so they kind of still trying to push people towards that culture victory, or at least make that more viable.
Nope, didn't
whether
work.
That works or not. Yeah,
didn't work. I'm a culture guy.
I'm getting there. I don't think they'll ever crack that one. That's been like the ultimate nut to crack for all Civ games. Culture victories. Nope, it's always military. But the whole idea here is that they've basically unstacked all the improvements from the terrain. So for basically, instead of just having your city and upgrading over time, you have all the stuff around your city, and you just kind of expand and build things around the city to access these new improvements. And the technologies and governments and stuff that you build will depend on where you are, which is kind of cool. So it matters a lot more where you build your cities and how you develop them and what you protect and all that. The game that we're talking about is the Civilization 6 on the iPad, which, surprise, is the exact same game. 100%. Nothing's different except it's touchscreen supported, which if you played it on like a touchscreen laptop, it already was touchscreen supported, so it's just a straight port. It looks and feels like the PC version. The touchscreen controls are pretty close to flawless. I've had very minimal issues there. It runs silky smooth. They say it's only supported on like the last 2 or 3 versions of iPad. So I have a relatively new one. If you have an older one, good luck. It's probably not going to run very well, if at all. And if you're not running with an iPad Pro, the battery life is a little rough, as you might expect from a PC game running on an iPad. But it does have some cool things to it. So first off, like on the PC, when you get towards the end of a game, like turn 300, there's a lot of time between the turns. Because you're not holding a laptop or sitting at your computer, you can now go sit on the couch and watch TV while you're waiting for everything to run through. That's great. This is perfect for couch play. It's going to be perfect for an airplane, for the train. Those are the places I've enjoyed it the most. There are some issues in terms of swiping. Sometimes the units don't swipe properly or you don't quite grab them right. It's pretty good. The hitbox is good, but it's not perfect, especially with big old fingers. A little clunky in the switching of units, which is kind of like that on the PC, but still there on the iPad. And probably the biggest single issue, if you're yelling into your in your phone right now, being like, "Why haven't you mentioned the price?" It's $60.
Oh Lord!
Yeah, so it's full retail price of the original game on your iPad. The only reason I got it is because when they released it, and you can still download like a trial and play the first 30 turns, which is about 45 minutes. It was $30, and I played it, and I was like, wow, this really is close to the same thing. And it was Christmas, and there was travel, and I was sitting around, and I was like, all right, what the heck? So I went in on it for 30, and I was still hesitant at 30. I don't know if I could recommend a game that is a year and a half old for $60 when you can get it on your laptop or computer for 20 to 30 on sale almost all the time. That's a tough sell. Mm-hmm. If you're going to play it on your iPad all the time, though, this is probably the most impressive game on an iPad, period, because it is a full PC game and not just like a dinky indie game that doesn't use a lot of resources. It's a big production. There's a lot of content here. You know, I was worried that once you get really deep into a game, it would slow down or get clunky or start to get a little scratchy and everything. It works fine. Really, the only feature it doesn't have is the online multiplayer. Did not launch with that. It does have local multiplayer. I don't know that I've ever played that. The AI is the same as it is on the PC, which is to say it's kind of wonky, but it always has been in Civ. So yeah, there you go. That's the bottom line. It's a brilliant implementation of a big game on the iPad. If you like Civilization games and know that you're going to play it, it's worth picking up. But you have to know you're going to play it. It's not like a $5 to $10 game on an iPad where you're like, if I don't play it, it's only $5. It's like $60, guys. Mm-hmm. Wait for it to be on sale. Civilization 5 is probably still my favorite. They made that, and like after they added all the expansions, and before that Civ 4. But I like this. I've liked all the Civ games that I've been playing since Civ 2. And they are supporting it too. Like that was one other concern I had early is, are they going to add the expansions? They've already added the 2 kind of smaller expansions. They're $5 each as in-app purchases. The brand new long-form expansion that just came out a couple months ago for the PC version, presumably that will come out in a few months as well. I hope so. And that's supposed to really kind of ramp up the game a little bit. So there you have it. A brilliant game that plays fantastic on your iPad that is way too expensive.
So 4 little tiny games that you can get for the change in your couch cushions, and then that monster.
Yeah, you better play this a lot, like once or twice a day. I don't know, I'm gonna run through an entire Civilization once a week in like clockwork, and then maybe it's worth it for you.
Okay, so that was our coverage of apps. These are the games that we've been playing in between, waiting for some of the hotter solo releases that are coming later in the year. So wanted to take this little time, a little bit of a break in our game playing schedule to revisit something I love to do, which is go into my psychology research and textbooks and come up with something that applies to our experience in board games. I came up with this during the end of the year when every single content creator, every single, person on YouTube and podcast, everything were coming out with top 10s, top 10 this, top 10 that, top 10 of the year, top 10 thematic games, top 10 this, that, and the like, and it occurred to me, like, why? Why is that? Well, not only why is that like a thing that content creators do, because I know why we do it. Anthony, what's the number one reason why all the content creators do top 10 lists?
Because people click on them.
Numbers. Our best episodes, the few top 10 lists that we've done on Every Night is Game Night, those are our best episodes by a lot.
Always. Every single time. We used to have this fight with Drew back on BGA when he was still on the show, and he hated top 10 lists, and I was like, data, I don't know what to tell you. It's also relatively easy to put them together once you nail down what you want to talk about. You just kind of not rattle them off. It's not easy content. We still got to do the research, but it's structured content.
And I wanted to break down exactly, why is it that people gravitate towards these lists? It isn't just like we're in board games. Board games are oriented around things. So, obviously making lists of things is a natural thing human beings do. But what happens, right? Why is it that we increase our listenership by 50% whenever anybody does a top 10 list? So I wanted to put together a couple of things. And this is the good stuff that lists do for our brains. Number one, difference matters. Lists stick out from the rest of the field of words. We see billions and billions of words over the course of our lifetime, but we only see about, thousands of numbers and a couple of lists. Like, it just always pops. Like, if you just look at article, ooh, list, it just stands out. So, okay, fine. It stood out. Now what happens? They're easy to ingest and remember. So our brains are energy saving mechanisms. Like, our brains hate to work. It sounds like really funny to say, but like, think of how easy it is for us to fall into habits. We just want to be able to mentally categorize something and move on. Like, our brains, whenever we learn something new, we're more likely to learn it when we've contextualized it and put it into some place, like next to something else. What a list does, it does that work for us. I mean, if you're learning about a game and someone tells you about a game and it's like, oh, whatever. But if you encountered that game in the context of a top 10 list, then boom, that all of a sudden you're going to more likely remember that and, kind of internalize that, which is, we all like that. Other things that lists feel really good, which is kind of weird, but when you see a top 10 list, automatically how long it's going to be. Like, when you click on like an article, you don't know how long the article is going to be. How long is this review going to be? How long is this going to be? But a top 10 list, that exactly how long it's going to take. It's going to take 10, however long it takes to talk about 10 different things. And that feels great. There's a quote that I got here from one of my researcher people. The positive experience of completion is enough to inform future decisions. We made it. Like, if you read an article, sometimes you don't make it all the way to the end and you kind of feel bad. Where it's like, oh, I probably should have read the whole thing. You're less likely to read the article in the future. But a top 10 list, you're likely to finish that one, because if you're good, you're going to organize that thing 10 to 1. It's not 1 to 10, it's 10 to 1. And you have to make it all the way to the end to find out what number 1 is. Speaking of that, they're like miniature games. It's a guessing game. What's going to be number 1? What's going to be on, numbers 2 through 5? It's like Family Feud. What's the number 1 answer, or whatever it is? People, that's really fun. I don't know, Anthony, if you have that experience of like when you're listening to like a top list, like, and it comes to like, the top 3, do you get that kind of surge of excitement? It's like, oh, I wonder what number 1's going to be. Yeah.
And actually I get to the point where I get a little disappointed if I've already figured out what it is. You're like, well, I know that this is a popular, they're just going to say this. Now I already know. Like, you want it to be something surprising, or better yet, something you've never heard of before. You're like, oh, something new to go track down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's cool. Like, and actually for newer gamers, that happens more often. So like, we're like old, grizzled people at this point, jaded. Like, if someone puts a list of top 10 deck builders and they haven't mentioned Dominion yet, then it's going to be number 1 or or whatever it is. Actually, you guys just did deck builders. What's the number 1 on that deck builder list? It was like,
was not Dominion though.
I forget. It was something like that. I was like, oh yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
but
like Star Realms or something. But yeah,
Star Realms. if you're a newer gamer, oh man, like, that's like exciting because like, oh my God, there's going to be a game that I love deck building. I don't know all of them and blah, 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 blah. So that's fun. And the brain kind of gets pleasure from that. And a good kind of approach to this thing doesn't skimp on that, like we're playing games, we're having fun, that we should really be attending to that. And then you mentioned it, Anthony, this is the last reason why top 10 lists are so popular. They are easier. I mean, it is research. We do have to do our research, but we don't have to do an intro and a conclusion. We don't have to frame the discussion. Like we just finished a conversation about Mice and Mystics versus Stuffed Fables in the last episode. And, I had to organize my thoughts and Julius had to organize his thoughts. And we had to kind of, come up with an intro and conclusion and transitions and all that kind of stuff. That kind of takes a little bit of work. If you're making a top 10 list, it's like, okay, I go, you go, I go, you go, we're done. Good. You don't have to write an introduction and conclusion. What are the hardest parts of an essay to write? The intro and the conclusion. This one, you just, put your stuff out there. The concept of the list is its own intro and you can just end it, and it's all good. So that's all stuff. I mean, you mentioned a couple of those. Like, can you think of the other reasons? Like BJ runs a lot of top 10 lists, and you mentioned before about how popular they are data wise. Is there anything else that kind of pops out for you in terms of why it's appealing, these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned at some point, like new gamers in particular, they're looking for volumes of data. If you listen to, if you hop on an episode of a podcast and they're like, we're talking about these 3 games, and maybe you're like, I've heard of that one or I've played that one and I don't like it, you're much less likely to listen to it than, let's say, top 10 whatever. Doesn't matter what it is, but you're like, well, there's probably going to be something in that list I haven't heard of before. So there's like that element of discovery, especially for new gamers. So that definitely comes up a lot. And people have mentioned like, oh, you mentioned, 6 games I'd heard of, but that one I had never heard of. So I'm going to track that one down. So like the kind of that feeling of discovery.
Mm-hmm. It's like casting a wider net, so like, and it's not just like throwing out a bunch of games that are unrelated. There's going to be a thematic tie. So our brains like that, we like having our list, things organized. So now we get into why Drew, my friend over there, didn't like lists so much. Why I tend to resist them a little bit as, a psychological person who knows kind of how these things work in our heads. And the biggest one, it kind of encourages an element of laziness. In the same, like basically lists are like information fast food. I've heard it said like, a list or a listicle is like cud that's already been chewed up and, and processed for you. And here you go, have some cud. That's disgusting. So anyway, basically like the information has already been processed for us. So like if someone gives you a list of top 10 thematic games, and they have a couple of things in that list that aren't exactly what you categorize as a thematic game. So like, why is, Scythe on the list of thematic games? Or why is this other game, all these other games that like have a lot of style, maybe a lot of theme. Why are these things on a list? Like a list doesn't encourage that, and inherently anyway. Like you can use a list to do that, which is kind of the best use of a list. I'll get to that in a second. But it's kind of, like, it takes the thinking out. It takes the analysis out. And like you were saying before, it's probably, lists are good for newer gamers, for, gamers that are kind of further along and they just want to like, they want to kind of get past that chunk of games and like get to know what the real quality games are, why the quality games are quality games. Lists aren't going to do that, man. That's the biggest reason why you might get a little bit of resistance to lists. And really, like, when it comes to the brain, and I'm kind of learning this more and more as I as I work with older folks, if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, people who kind of just go through life and they don't challenge themselves intellectually, they don't, like, go grapple with why questions and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of like, the brain is not as sharp, and our culture, maybe this isn't just a board game thing, this is kind of a wider culture thing. The more we kind of reset to listicles, a list approach to, organizing and thinking and all that kind of stuff, the more we kind of cheat ourselves. Like, I mean, it's good to challenge ourselves. It's good to, get into like the why question. So like here on this podcast, we do list. I mean, believe me, we like numbers. Don't worry about that. But, at the same time, it's like, okay, we want to just like, get into the meat of a game. And hopefully, we have the listeners who are willing to really engage with that and be like, okay, wow, I didn't see the game from that perspective that made me think. That is like the biggest compliment for me as a podcaster, and Anthony is also like, really analytical guy, which is like why I really enjoyed doing the podcast with him. It's thinking that goes on, and so that's kind of my thing. Like, okay, why we don't do so much lists, but at the end of the day, they get numbers, so we'll try to kind of split the difference there. So I mean, does that make sense in terms of why Drew was resistant to lists, or was he coming at it from a different perspective?
Yeah, I don't know if he ever went into so much depth, but I'm sure it's something along those lines. I mean, they are lazy. I won't argue with that. I'm a content creator by profession, so I know how many times I've written more lists in my life than you could ever imagine. And they're easy to write. I mean, you write the outline and then you just go find the content to fill in the gaps. And then ideally some references. But there's not a lot of analysis there because you only need to write 50 to 100 words per item. And it's the same when you're recording content. It's not a lot. It's quantity over quality in that case, which is not always a bad thing. Sometimes quantity is important. Like we said, some people are doing research. Other people just want a quick hit of something easy to listen to. Other people want, to compare and make sure they're not missing anything. But I would never want to only do lists because then you're missing out on actual conversations about gaming and comparisons between games and, some of the more in-depth discussions that we have on this podcast and on BGA as well. So it's nice to mix it up a little, and it gives us a break sometimes week to week, and other times we can kind of go a little bit deeper, and sometimes we mix it up, and we have a list, but it's more, it's not like top 10 whatever, it's just discussing a particular point where we have multiple bullets,
Right, so like that's the best use of a list. Like if you're teaching, you have to make, organize your topics. Like if you're teaching a game, it's really useful to kind of, break down the teaching part of the game into point A, point B, point C, point D, and just do it that way as opposed to kind of hitting people with a whole chunk of knowledge. So yeah, I mean, they have their space. I guess what I wanted to point out was like there is a limit to that. And the limit is when a list kind of ends your thinking, it doesn't prompt more thinking. So I think people sometimes can look at a list and say, they make a judgment about it. It's like, okay, these are the top 10 thematic games. Well, there you go. Or these are the top 10, whatever games. Or, this is the top 100 and I don't have to know any other games or whatever it is. I'm kind of strawmanning a little bit, but really not as much. I think that, people kind of rely on those lists and it's like they don't kind of do further thinking about that. Going past those lists, using the list to kind of like, oh, I didn't know about that game. I didn't know, like when we did top 100, I didn't know about limes. I didn't know about Walnut Grove. All these other games that like I kind of opened my eyes to. So that's cool. Like that's the optimal use of lists in these board game contexts. So at the end of the day, we are going to mix it up. You're not going to see as many lists from at least this podcast as some of the other ones, but we will kind of throw it in there too because we do realize that there is room for quantity and quality.
Alrighty, guys. So that is our conversation about both lists and a list of apps to go check out. So.
Not a top 10 list though. Smash Up is nowhere near anybody's top 10 list.
Yeah, that's right. There's like 3 separate lists there. So definitely check out some of those apps, the good ones at least, and let us know what you think. And you'll definitely hear another one of these app episodes in the next 3 to 6 months because there's a lot of big stuff coming up real soon. And let us know on any other topics, if there's other things you want to hear about or get a little more insight on or just to hear a better, more in-depth discussion on than we maybe typically throw out there. Let us know. We love your guys' ideas. So that's going to go ahead and be everything for this week. Make sure to hit us up on ENGN_podcast on Twitter, as well as everynightisgamenight.com. Until next week, though, go ahead and grab a solo game off the shelf, and let's make every night game night.
Later, everybody.